Good morning, everyone. We're just waiting for a couple of others to join, and then we'll get started. I hope you're well. Have a quick swig of my coffee. Well, shall we start?
We can make a start indeed.
Okay. Well, welcome everyone to our latest webinar on what is sustainable investing. My co-host Emma will also be helping me and speaking today. And today's webinar is being recorded, so if you do miss it, you'll be able to find it on our website under our sustainable portfolios. So without further ado, what's the agenda? Well, the agenda, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about us. Also, when did sustainable investing begin? What is SRI and ESG? How sustainable investing works? We're going to have a quick look at our model portfolios and also answer any questions. Now, at the bottom, you'll have a chat box and you'll be able to put any questions in there. And also, should you think of anything after the webinar, you can always email us, and our email is at the end, and we'll answer any questions you have. So, well, what about us? Well, okay, so I used to originally work for a company called Acuma, and you probably never heard of Acuma, but the parent company was American Express, and I used to give financial advice to their credit card holders. I then went to work for a company called Friends Provident, which is quite relevant to today's presentation. And then obviously I was working for Face-to-Face Finance. So Emma.
So a little bit about me. I'm obviously Emma. I've worked in a few different areas of financial services. So I've been in the industry for 7 years. I started off at Norwich and Peterborough Building Society before spending a year at Moneyfacts, which is a financial research company. And in 2018, I joined the family at Face-to-Face Finance, where I've been supported to do all of my exams. So I'm now also a fully qualified financial consultant myself.
Okay, so a little bit about our company. If I can actually move the presentation on. And it seems to have frozen. So let me just. Well, Emma.
Hang on a second then. Let me just bring it up and we'll have a swap over quickly.
Look at that. Doesn't matter what happens with technology, something sometimes goes wrong.
If not, if we just stop sharing your screen. And then share it again.
Okay, I shall stop sharing. Right. Okay, let's see if that's worked.
Can you click now?
And the answer is no, I can't.
Not to worry, I have it just here. 1 second. Stop screen sharing, Ralph. And here we go. Can you see?
Okay, so thanks for bearing with us. Anyway, about Face2Face Finance, we're based in Cringleford. We're independent financial advisors. We're truly independent. We're not even part of a network. We're directly regulated by the FCA. We've been established for over 15 years, and we have a sister company called Face2Face Estate Planning. And that deals with wills, trusts, lasting powers of attorney, that sort of thing. But we've always said that at its best, financial advice is always face-to-face. So, Emma, do you want to explain what makes us unique as an office?
Indeed, I can. So hopefully, can you just see the presentation still? I'm just checking, or have you got something else there as well?
No, I can see the presentation.
That's okay then. So in our office, a lot of you may already know that we are quite unique. We wear our slippers. So we like to be nice and comfortable. And even while we're working at home, we're still wearing our slippers at home. So Ralph, what else do we do?
We've also got a director of happiness who's a teddy bear, and he's very good at raising money for various charities. He's also an author, and his second book has come out shortly, or about to come out, and money from that book will also go to a children's charity.
In our office as well, we are also working towards being sustainable. So we have our milk delivered in glass bottles. We have a battery recycling box, so they can all be sent off and recycled safely. And our charity of the year at the moment is the Norfolk and Norwich University Hospital NHS Foundation Trust. Bit of a mouthful, that one. But we also like to plant lots of trees. So hopefully Ralph's going to tell us a bit more about what the trees are and what we do with those.
Yes, I can. We use a search engine called Ecosia, and depending on the searches that we make, it actually plants trees for us. So far we've planted over 100 trees. And we also looked at the companies who supply us, one of them who does some marketing for us. And we've also got them planting trees as well. So that's worked very well. So Emma is now going to explain something about the word ethical.
So often when people think about sustainable investing, the first word that pops into their head is ethical, and it's not an unusual word to think of. But there's several other words that might come to mind when you think about sustainable investing. So things like green, poor returns, ESG and SRI, positive and negative screening, or possibly even the younger generation. You might even have some other words that are buzzing around in your head at the moment, but you can save them and tell us later. But today's webinar, we're hopefully going to tell you a little bit more about each of those things and possibly even open your mind to the option of sustainable investing.
So when did sustainable begin? Well, first of all, it began in America, and they had quite large funds under management, and they still do. And then a company in the UK decided to set up an ethical investment. And let's see if you can guess what year it was. It was the maiden voyage of the spacecraft. It was the year that the Brighton bomb went off from the IRA. Purple Rain was released. Ghostbusters. Virgin Atlantic Airways was launched. And there's obviously a picture of a mine, and it wasn't that mines closed. It was actually that the miners' strike had gone on for a year. So that year was 1984. In 1984, Friends Provident, the company that I used to work for, actually set up the first UK ethical fund, and it was called the Stewardship Fund. If you could move the slide forward,
Right.
please. It was 1984, and they were the first ones to start it. Friends Provident started in 1832 by the Society of Quakers. So even when I worked there was Quakers on the board of directors. They decided, because of their ethos of investing themselves, that they would launch this stewardship fund. So it had a separate board of directors, one of those being Joanna Lumley, and she was involved because of her work with zoos and the care of animals. And when the Stewardship Fund was launched, many people actually called it the Brazil Fund, and it wasn't because it invested primarily in Brazil or was there to save Brazil. It was just thought that anyone investing in an ethical fund would be nuts. So hence the reason why Brazil. But as you can see from the performance chart, it's done very well over the years. And even then, when it came to ethical investing, things were very difficult. Choices had to be made, and sometimes very hard choices. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples. One of the companies that they invested in at one time was Manchester United Football Club. The positives of the football club was the fact that sport is very healthy, so that was good. Manchester United were very socially responsible for the local area that they were in, which is obviously the Manchester area. So they were the positives. The negative was actually that the footballs at that time were found to be made with child labour. So the obvious thing to do was, well, you know, we're either going to pull our investment out, or you're going to have to get your footballs made elsewhere. But one of the problems was with child labour is sometimes the reason why child labour is used is because it's the only money that could be coming into the family. So one of the problems that they actually had to attend to was the fact that if they said no more child labour, actually people in the countries that these footballs were being made, their family could actually starve to death, which is, you know, a quite shocking scenario. Another one where stewardship was used completely on a positive was B&Q. Most of us have heard of B&Q, the DIY place. In the early days, the wood that B&Q sold wasn't sustainable. And the stewardship fund manager went to B&Q and said, look, we like investing in B&Q. We think you're a good company, but we don't like what you're doing with your wood. We don't think the supplies are correct. And if you don't change that, we're going to pull out. And B&Q, to their credit, at the time, they actually changed exactly that. They changed the supplies, so it was all renewable wood. So I'm now going to pass over to Emma, who's going to tell you about how sustainable investing works.
So I'm going to start off here by talking a little bit more about what ESG is and SRI. So starting with ESG, environmental social governance. So it was first coined in 2005 in a study called Who Cares Wins? Quite an appropriate name, I think. At the moment, around 25% of professionally managed assets are invested using ESG. So what does ESG actually stand for, and what does it refer to? So it's a set of standards, 3 standards that are used in a company's operation. So the E for environmental takes into account things like their energy consumption, waste management, and even their compliance with government environmental regulations. So an example of this is Thorntons. So Thorntons have continually exceeded their targets on their climate change agreement. And in the last 12 months, their gas and electricity consumption has declined by 10%. So they're really keeping on top of what they've said they're going to do. Social is the S for ESG, obviously, which refers to how the companies manage their relationships with the entire supply chain. So whether that be the suppliers they use, do they have the same values as them? Also thinks about how they support their own employees and even how they engage with their local communities. So are there any local causes that they tend to regularly support? The G for governance takes into account the company's leadership and executive. Are they being paid 300% more than any other employee in the company? Do they really bring that much extra value to the company? And do they try to avoid conflicts of interest within its board members? So there's lots of different areas that they can look at within their business. And then what they need to do is make sure they've got a really robust system in place to make sure that they can stay accountable for all of those things. Sounds easy enough, I think. But then companies don't need to do all of those things to be considered ESG. So it'd be really difficult to comply with everything. So they only have to choose certain areas. And then it's up to the fund managers of the sustainable and ethical funds to consider what their priorities are within their fund. So this is where the SRI, so the socially responsible investing, comes into play, and it's really, really closely linked to the ESG and basically just takes it one step further. So it's actively selecting or rejecting investments into certain companies based on what they comply with and what they choose to do. But Ralph's going to tell us a little bit more about that later on. So I'm just going to give you a few examples. So a fund manager may choose to invest in McDonald's as they're now offering healthier options for Happy Meals. They might choose to invest in Microsoft because they've been carbon neutral since 2012. I just want you to pretend for a moment that you're a fund manager of an ethical fund which invests in Tesco's. What do you think would have been going through your mind last Christmas when the young girl found a note in her Christmas card, reportedly from the Chinese prisoner, being forced to work against their will? This is exactly the sort of thing that fund managers are looking for, and obviously could stop them investing in a particular company. But it's also going to make a company look at their supply chains. Are they really in line with their ESG values? Funnily enough, on this occasion, Tesco's soon stopped production of those Christmas cards.
Okay, so really when it comes to sustainable investments, we're looking at positive screening from fund managers. So they would look at a company, they would look at what they do with their waste, their recycling, also how they treat their own employees, from equal pay, gender, that sort of thing. They'd also look at their corporate and social responsibilities, how they deal with their neighbours, and also even down to how they actually power their buildings, that sort of thing. And like Emma said, you know, a business doesn't have to do all of those things, because to be honest, it's very difficult for businesses to do every one of those, especially older style businesses. But so long as they're moving in the right direction, that's going to be good. So that's what a fund manager would be looking for now. And I'm now going to talk a little bit more about the past. So previously, if someone came to us and said, look, I'd like to have some ethical funds, we would have normally given them a questionnaire. And the questionnaire would say about the things that maybe they wouldn't want. So just tell us what you wouldn't want. And generally speaking, they wouldn't want pornography. They wouldn't want investments in arms, tobacco, alcohol. And they wouldn't want it in oil companies because oil companies are obviously polluters, that sort of thing. So that was the negative screening. Now, the problem with that is that if that was to happen, you wouldn't have oil companies, and you'd say, well, that's quite right because they're bad companies. But these companies are very, very wealthy, but they can also see the writing on the wall. They want to make profit. That's what they're there for. But they don't want to just make profit today. They want to make profit in 100 years' time and maybe 200 years' time. So at the moment, you have both Shell and BP, which are two very large investors in renewable energy. So by not investing in Shell or BP, who could potentially be helping a long time to save the environment, is that right or wrong? And it comes back to every investment in an ethical fund. Some of the times it's not as easy as it seems. So I'm now going to get Emma to introduce this young lady.
So, this little girl was aware of climate change at the age of 8 and started her mission at the age of 15. We all know Greta Thunberg, and she's the straightforward speaking environmental activist who tends to criticise a lot of our world leaders. At the UN summit in September last year, Greta said, "We are in the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you?" For such a young girl, she certainly created a lot of noise. And whilst it may have fallen upon deaf ears in the world of politics, she's definitely created a stir in the world of business and finance. So 2019 saw the biggest surge in sustainable investing yet. So another thing that Greta also said is, this is not a one-time thing. This is our entire future. So investing in climate change alike, do you think sustainable investing could be our future? So here's a few things to point out to you, basically, some information that might be nice to know. So in the last 18 months, or up to the end of June this year, £54.7 billion was invested in ethical funds in the UK, Ireland and Luxembourg. So that's a really big influx compared to before. 26% of the UK assets under management are invested using the SRI strategy. 2/3 of people have increased their investment in sustainable funds over the last 5 years. And 78% of investors say that ethical investing is more important to them now than it was 5 years ago. Now, my question to you is, are you part of that 78%? Over to you, Ralph.
Okay, so here we are coming on to Ballygifford Positive Change. Now, we run our own model portfolios, and in a developed markets, we've actually used this fund. Now, we didn't use this fund because it was an ethical fund or an SRI fund. We used it simply because the performance was good. So it actually made the cut. And to give you an idea, if you invested £100,000 3 years ago solely in that investment and £100,000 in the FTSE 100, you can see that there's different outcomes. The FTSE 100, you'd have lost around about £10,000 of your £100,000. And the Ballygifford, you'd have actually made around about 200, or your fund would now be worth about £220,000. So quite a bit of difference. So I'm now going to talk you through our portfolio.
So how do we actually construct our portfolios? So we use a very, very similar method to how we would with our regular portfolios that you may have seen before. But we just start off by completing an ethical questionnaire. So as Ralph talked about earlier, the positive and negative screening, we use a positive criteria and we choose all the areas that we'd like to have in our portfolio. What we then do is run all of those funds, the funds through some research, which basically aligns the funds that we want to have with the risk questionnaire and brings us with a big list. And we choose all of the funds from that list that have a 3-year track record or more. So to be eligible for our portfolios, they have to have a 3-year track record. Anything with a shorter period, we don't use. So we then split all those funds up into all the different asset classes. So the fixed interest, UK equities, developed markets, etc. And we put it through some more software to find out which of those funds are available on the investment platforms that we're looking to use. So once we've done that, we have a look at all the different funds that we've got and we're looking at the quartiles of them. So we're looking for quartile ones ideally. So that's the performance of the funds. And we're also looking at their FE score. So that's what helps us to find out how risky these funds are so that we can obviously risk rate our portfolios. So once we've done that, we've obviously started narrowing down our list. So what we then need to do is narrow it down to a maximum of kind of 15, 20 funds. And we're looking to have as much diversification as possible within that portfolio. So we have a look at all the funds that we've got left on our list to be able to do that. The final thing we then do is we run it through some more software. I think you've got the idea. We've got lots of different software we use. And it basically gives that portfolio an overall risk rating so that when we come out to see you, we can obviously make sure it's aligned with the risk that you're willing to take. And we know that it's going to do what we say it's going to do. So Ralph can tell you what our portfolios actually look like now.
Our sustainable portfolio is still currently based on our mainstream portfolios in the percentage makeup. So we have fixed interest, property, UK equity, developed markets and emerging markets. So that's where we've looked for the type of funds. However, under property, where we'd normally have 5%, we haven't got any because unfortunately there's no property funds that meet the criteria, which I do think that's a shame personally. I do like watching Grand Designs every now and again, and I see these properties being built and they tend to cost virtually nothing to heat, and they're using the latest technology. And I just wonder how long it's going to be before mainstream builders such as Bovis or Wimpey or whoever actually start thinking in the same way as other businesses. As you can see, under developed markets, Ballyclifford is there as one of the funds we use, but it's only one of the funds. And we even have emerging markets, and emerging markets at the moment tend to be the biggest polluters, but some of that has been caused again by the Western world moving their heavy industry to the east. But the emerging market countries tend to be quicker on the uptake to realise what's going on, and they've started to invest a lot of money in their own countries on making sure that things are a better place environment-wise. So let's actually have a look at the fund performance. And what we're looking at is, we call it back testing. So it's going back 3 years. If we had these funds in place 3 years ago, what would have happened. And we're using a risk 4, and a risk 4 is called balanced, and it's the middle range fund of our portfolios. So again, with the £100,000 in the FTSE 100 or £100,000 in our risk 4, the £100,000 in the FTSE, as we know, will have lost about £10,000. And in our risk 4 portfolio, it would have made just over £26,000. So a little bit different to the £120,000 of the Ballygifford. The difference is, though, that this is a risk-rated portfolio and a Ballygifford is a one-off fund. So if you were to put all your money in a Ballygifford fund, it would be a risk 7+. So not something that we would normally recommend. So that pretty much ends the presentation. I'm now going to ask Emma if there's been any questions, and hopefully on the screen you'll also see our email address if you want to email a question in rather than ask it on the chat box. So Emma, has there been any questions?
No, we've obviously answered lots of things well. Oh, there's one just popped up. Hang on there.
Okay.
I have a thank you for the presentation. So not a question this time.
Okay.
But if there's anyone has got any questions, they could always unmute themselves and ask us a question out loud rather than have to sit and type it. So if anyone has one, feel free to unmute yourself now.
Okay.
We're safe.
We are safe, so well done, and thank you all very much for listening in. And as I said, this will be on our website, and I would like to apologise for the slight glitch, but with any use of the internet, it doesn't always go smoothly all the time. So thank you.
Thank you, everyone.